All right, folks. The Dude Guy episode 3 is back. It's here. Black and
Make it
white
centered here.
edition this time. Yin and yang. I don't know which one is which, but there you go. Matt, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I am.
Happy to
I'm
be
super.
here. Dude guy.
Dude Guy Friday. Dude Guy Friday afternoons. Those of you who don't know is Dude Guy episode inside Endurance Nation. About every 2 weeks, we sit down and cover some current events, things that are happening, just muse on stuff that we are, sort of thinking about, wrestling with, talking to the members of Endurance Nation about, or just like front of mind or impacting us as athletes, coaches, leaders inside the space. And this is a chance for us to kind of share some of that energy with you. And you always can, message us inside the team or message us on social media. You can find us at Endurance Nation. Let us know what you want us to talk about, etc. Wherever this podcast is published, you can message us and we'll talk to you more about it. And the way it works, we have topics. I put down some topics. I'm gonna head over there right now. Let me see. Did you just take any topics? Oh, you did put topics down. All right. I like it. I wasn't sure if you'd actually put topics down.
I'm gonna bring some topics.
Oh, you're so smart. You're the kind of person who just shows up with topics. You just, you just be like, well, I think I want to talk about the impact of the depletion of the ozone layer and I'm like, you have no notes, no cards. Like, what are you doing? And you just talk about it. I'm a write it down kind of person for sure. I will say though, in this document here, your bullets look different than my bullets. They're not formatted the same. What's up with that? We're not
That's
a
gonna
team.
throw us off. That's gonna totally throw us off.
It's totally gonna throw us off. Like your bullets are closer to the left than my bullets. Like my bullets have already, you got a head start on my bullets. I don't like it. All right. Okay. Well, let's get in. We got a couple topics here today. So I'll read off mine first. So new gravel tri series, USAT, takes over old Xterra events and rebrands them. Hardest try you've never heard of. Interesting topic. And then some of the conversations you and I've been having inside the team, which I have to actually finish hopefully this weekend while my wife is away. Some of the functional, well, I guess we're calling it benchmarking tests for our long course triathletes as well. What do you have on your plate?
I want to return to one of the topics that you brought up. So I'm just recycling things that you already talked about. But
Okay.
and during our first Dude Guy, you talked about some of the tech in the triathlon bikes are now like jet fighters.
Right.
And I want to talk about how the evolution of some of the bikes and what tech is actually relevant to the rider or to the person. And then the other one you mentioned was I'm going to butcher his name here, but Olav Alexander, the coach to Norwegian coach to Christian Blumenfeld and Gustav Even, and some of the things that they were talking about on a podcast with how they train with Jack Kelly. So that he does a deep dive with the coach and specifically asks them, what are you doing with these guys that everybody is so hyped about. So those are there you go.
Okay. All right. I like it. Well, let's go. Well, we'll do, every episode we kind of do a couple topics because we know your attention span is super short. And so let's go back to jet fighter bikes because that's something that's really interesting. I have a jet fighter bike in my basement hanging up, my Ventum 1 bike, which hanging up doesn't look like a bicycle at all without wheels on it and stuff like that. And the whole jet fighter bike concept came when I was trying to sell that bike. I was like, okay, beginning of the pandemic, not going to race triathlons for a while. I've had this bike for a few years. I can sell this bike, turn it into a gravel bike, whatever it's going to be, and do some adventuring. And when the world comes back, I'll buy a new triathlon bike, and then I'll have a new bike, and everything's good, etc. So I took pictures of the bike, all the things, cleaned them up, and then posted them to like Facebook Marketplace and other places. And all the comments were like, "Who would ride that thing?" Or "Boy, that looks uncomfortable." Or "Did you pee on it?" And nobody actually thought the bike was nice. I felt like the person who buys a fancy car for themselves and is so happy in their fancy car, and then they go to show their friends, like, look at my fancy car, and all the people are like, that thing's so not practical. How could you possibly sit in it? Like, can you even hear yourself inside that thing? How, like you're, like it's so dangerous. You're closer to the bottom of the semi trucks you're driving around. You're an idiot. I was like, oh man, people hate on my bike. But it's not about hating on my bike. The jet fighter bike thing really is that I think people look at triathlon bikes right now, like competitive triathlon bikes, the stuff you see in magazines and online magazines, and it's hard to tell that it's a bicycle anymore. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. So like, I think when you're bike shopping, I think this was a really cool topic that I thought you brought up was when you're bike shopping and they talk about all the tech that goes into the bike.
Mhm.
I think it's hard as a consumer to sort out, like, is that tech going to be relevant for me? Like if I go from a $2,000 bike to a $3,000 bike, will I gain that much when I go from, when I go up in price? Am I really buying tech
Mhm.
that is going to make me, a faster or better athlete, or is it just bling?
Mhm.
You know,
I've
so
got an analogy for that.
sure,
Do you want
shoot,
an
yeah,
analogy for that? Here we go. Go,
yeah.
dude
What?
guy analogy.
Go, dude,
Well,
guy
shopping
analogy.
for a bike, it's a lot like shopping for a haircut, right? Which is to say that like you can pay $20 for a haircut or you could pay $250 for a haircut. At the end of the day, you're still getting a haircut. You really like your $250 haircut because you paid a lot of money for it and they like massaged your head and put like one chemical in and then washed it out and put a new chemical in and washed it out. And you got to sit in a fancy chair and all of that stuff. It took like 90 minutes. That's great. And then on the other side, like just go all the way to the other side of the spectrum, you're sitting in this super old chair. The guy cutting your hair like is super old. He can barely hold the clippers. It's a miracle. Somehow you come out of there and the hair cut looks good, but you were really worried about like your eyebrows there for a while. Perhaps other parts of your structural anatomy could have been clipped or stabbed inadvertently. The chemicals he was using have labels that are literally stuff you remember your father saying, "My father used to use this to shave." You're like, I think it's the same bottle. I don't even think it's like the same company because it doesn't exist. It's the same bottle. That guy's just been saving it for about 85 years. But at the end of the day, you come out of both places, you had a haircut, right? Which is kind of what you wanted. So I think a lot of times shopping for a triathlon bike is just what kind of experience do you want to have? Like, do you want to have an experience where this is a luxury item for you and you just want to be able to check off all the boxes? You want to check off boxes you didn't even know needed to be checked because it's like a secret menu. They're not even there. You're like, someone's like, oh, nice bike, but did you think about the new science that just came out about the factors of the Earth's gravitational pull when you're at altitude heading slightly downhill in a singlet? Because that just came out. Did you see that study? And you're like, 1 second. You go to your phone and you're like, swipe, 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 swipe. You click on the menu and you look up at it and you're like, haha. The engineers already thought about that. They actually invented the microscope that determined the slope of the Earth was going to be impacted from the photons that were coming in. And you're like, my bike already does all that, right? Or you just have a bike that's so good that nobody even knows what's going on and they don't even talk about it. They're just like, I don't want to ask any questions about anything because this person who bought this bike must know all of the things. But at the end of the day, all the bikes have two wheels on them and they hopefully have brakes and they shift and they take you places. So I think you kind of have to decide how deep down the rabbit hole you want to go. Because to your point, how much faster does a fast bike make you than a ordinary bike, than a recreational bike? Like what's the difference inside there, right?
Yeah.
Just the
So
bike itself.
yeah, like I was thinking, how this applies kind of like to Endurance Nation in the community and stuff. And like, I it goes back to the experience. So like, let's say I'm going to go buy, bike B that's really super aero because I'm falling in love with it for whatever particular reason because of the marketing. It's great to have a community of folks to be able to say like, hey, I'm thinking about laying down X amount of money for this fancy piece of equipment. And, there's a bunch of folks that, in our community that have already probably either done that research or checked for that one off study for going downhill on a singlet,
Right.
or have purchased the bike or seen the bike and said, oh yeah, that bike looks awesome. But that whole integrated front end, when you go to take that on travel, yeah, all the cables run down through the headset. And it took me an hour to put the headset back on after I traveled with it, and you're like, oh, I wasn't thinking about that. I was only thinking about how cool I would look on it when I'm riding down the highway.
Right.
So like, I think that's where I think some of the benefit of our community really comes into, because you can lay out that question to somebody of like, hey, I'm thinking about buying this fighter jet. Yes, no, what do you think? And you can get, folks that are going to give you better answers than like the answers that you got back for, hey, you want to buy my bike? Hey, did you pee on it? Like you can get folks that are going to say, well, did you consider, the assembly, disassembly? Do you like electronic shifting, stuff like that. So I think that's where like the use of the community is super helpful for, kind of getting into so they could tell you, I've been to the barber with the $250 haircut, and this is what happens. If that's what you want, go ahead.
Right.
Because some folks have probably had that experience so far.
Yeah, they've had that experience, and they can also tell you, like, once you have the bike and you're like super disappointed that it actually doesn't come apart. Like, actually, you need to buy a special bike box that goes with the special bike. You wouldn't know that because you haven't seen people with a special bike box, because those other people figured it out before they bought the bike and didn't buy the bike. But you kind of need to know what that looks like. For me, so what do I optimize for on a bike? Like, what does that progression look like? My progression was road bike that I just had bought, like, used, and then put aero bars on it and a forward angle seat post. And I rode that for like 4 years ish. It was a giant TCR. And so I could do put a change of seat post and take off the aero bars when I wanted to ride road, like outside of season, and then move it forward when I was in season. And it got me to Kona my first time. I rode it for a whole ton of times. Definitely not safe. I should not have been fitting my bicycle, but whatever. Next bike was a Cervelo P3 that I actually got and got fit. And that was incredible because I was like, it felt so stable, because my road bike that I turned into a triathlon bike, like perching all the way on the front of it, was not stable. It felt amazing. I was, my power went down a little bit, but I was faster overall. And I was like, oh, this is fantastic. And so I went from the P3 up to a P5, which I also love. Cervelo makes great bikes, super easy. Enjoyed the P5 for a few years. And then we had Ventum join the team as an emerging brand and with a sponsor. So got a great inside deal on the bike, and was like, I'll go to a sort of a more durable frame. And the reason I liked going to the Ventum was, one, I could upgrade the components because the frame cost was low, because, component changes and frame technology, they're both expensive. But I also like the fact that the bike was easy to work on. And I think that's something that people don't necessarily appreciate. Like, when you buy a more complex bike, it actually is harder to work, right? Like, so right now, if your car breaks down, most people don't know what to do. They don't know how to fix it. They don't know what it is. They don't know how the systems work. And you take it into the mechanic, you're kind of at the mercy of the dealership. They're like, oh yeah, the flux capacitor, is burp some jelly beans onto the, conveyor belt. Like, you're screwed. Like, we have no more gnomes left. They all went home at 3. So you're going to have to pay us $9 million. And you're like, what? Like, I have to do, like, that's really, like, that's odd. And so, which I love, because when you go to the car dealership, they've always got that little piece of tire that's like in front of the thing. And it's like, it shows you, like, not new tire, medium tire, and like super old tire, so you're like kind of touching this thing and doing it. Like, that's the only thing in your car that you can be like, ooh, that needs some work. It's the only thing, and they've managed to capture, because everything else about your car, it doesn't make sense, and there's no way to measure it, look at it, etc. They're just like, ooh, that doesn't look good. And you're like, okay, sounds good to me. I don't know where I'm at. And I think when you start thinking about your bike and you start thinking about complexity, unless you've been spending time in the sport and have deepened your knowledge of not only the things you want, but what your goals and aspirations are, if you have a disconnect between sort of like investing time and investing money into the sport, you're going to be relatively unhappy, because you're probably not going to make the best purchase for you. So I always tell people when they say, oh, I want to get a new bike, I'm like, how long have you been doing this thing? Right. And if they say, oh, it's my first race, I'm like, let's wait. Like, there's no rush. Like, do the race first. Your perceptions of what you want will change. If you do a race and say, oh, wow, I didn't have these fancy wheels and I didn't have this fancy helmet, etc., and I went this fast, I think a new bike would make me faster. You and I, we get to go behind the scenes and look at the data. Like, let's go take a look at it. Right. Like, if you're still, not training a ton, right? If you're just genuinely not that strong yet, if you haven't gone through like a full season of Endurance Nation, to me, again, it's not worth it. That's sort of like paying for college now, because you're like, my 5-year-old is so smart and she's going to go to, Cal Poly, like, it totally. So I'm just going to buy it now. So when she gets there, it's going to be great. And, by the time she grows up, like, she hates you, and she doesn't want to go to school at all. In fact, people don't even go to school anymore. Cal Poly's out of business. She started her own business on TikTok. And you're like, what's happening? And you spent all this money on a thing that isn't really what you wanted by the time you got there. So I think that the corollary between, like, how much are you training really is a good factor for selecting a bike. The only place that doesn't matter is if you're someone who's like crazy money. and you're like, I just like to buy lots of different bikes, to try them out and see them, and I'm not attached to them, it's fine. But if you're buying something because it's your hobby and you want to get better at it, then you really do care, like if that doesn't work, then you really are kind of bummed, because it was like your thing. It's part of your dream. It's part of the thing that you're making, like the faster me,
Like I want to follow up on like one of the comments that you made along the way of like the experience of like when you moved from, your forward seat post option to like the triathlon bike and the P3C. And I did the similar thing. I had a transition through a bunch of different triathlon bikes. But what was most interesting to me about the jet fighter bikes was I was enamored with Canyon at the time because whatever. And but they have that whole integrated front end. It's super low. Jan was riding the bike at the time. And I went and got fit. And basically the fitter was like, hey, like you can buy that bike, but it's built for a pro. You just can't get into that position. Like that front end is so low that like that's not going to work for you. So like, it was interesting that like, I could go buy the super fancy bike, and I probably could ride it, but like, it really wasn't the right bike for me. Just so then like the other bikes down in the price range were actually the bike based on the geometry. Like the geometry would shift across the price range. So that like, the super high end one was super low in the front. I'm not flexible enough to get into it. So like, so that was really interesting to me of like, getting fit first and then, finding bikes that fit you, right? Like, like if I could have bought the, I guess I could have paid for it, but the ridiculous, the front end, the ridiculous super bike, but like the geometry just wouldn't have worked for me. I probably wouldn't have performed as well. Right. So that was just really interesting to me that there is something to, you got to watch the geometry across the price range as well, as it's not just like, oh, that's the same frame. And like, there's a reason why that front end is lower and stuff like that. Cause they're going after the super high end, super flexible guy. But yeah. So yeah, anyway, that was just really insight. And I learned a lot from that experience of just, figuring out what my measurements were and then finding bikes that kind of fit underneath me versus the other way around.
That's a good point. Like there has to be some sort of intermediary step. It's not just like I'm here and I have money and I want to be fast, so I'll just take this money and exchange you for this thing that will make me faster. It's not a one-to-one. I just got off a podcast with Greg from the team talking about swimming and stuff like that, and sort of explaining that like it's not a one-for-one. There's a learning process that happens between these 2 points. Right. And if you don't take the time to learn, whether it's by doing the reps and the training and figuring out what you like and don't like, or renting a bike or trying something different, or just training for a long period of time and sort of understanding strengths, weaknesses, opportunities in terms of where your speed is and what you want to optimize for. If you don't take that time, if you don't invest that time, then you really can't properly invest that money, because someone's going to come along and be like, you're looking at that pink bike? You need that red bike, the one that's 4 times more. And you're like, red, I love red. I look so good in red. And you're like, I'll buy it, and then you're like, what do I do now? And it's really tough. I have this, we have an athlete on the team who's like this, is coming to Mallorca. He's like, all right, I'm ready. Mallorca, going to Mallorca. It's going to be awesome. I bought a ticket to Madrid. I'm like, oh, okay. Why do you want to go to Madrid? He's like, that's close to Mallorca, isn't it? I was like, no, like Mallorca's an island. He's like, oh, how do I get from Madrid to Mallorca? I'm like, you would buy a plane ticket to Mallorca. You might stop in Madrid, but you have to actually fly to Mallorca to get to Mallorca. He's like, oh, which I thought was like a one-time thing. And then he just messaged me the other day and he's like, I rented a bike. The shops that you told me to rent they didn't have bikes that I liked. So I rented a bike from this shop. Is it close to where we're staying? I'm like, I don't know. Let me use this map technology they have right here. I'll click the word map. I'm like, it is not close to where we're staying. It's actually on the other side of the island. But it does look like it looks like an amazing bicycle on the other side of the island. I'm like, how do we connect these two things together? So there's someone who has like energy and capital, but is not kind of digging in a little bit to be like, how do I make sure that I'm directing my energy and capital to where I want to go? Like literally where I want to go, because he's going to be in Madrid. I'm on Mallorca and his bike's on the other side of the island. I'm like, go magic stuff. So
well, we all done it. It's all about the enthusiasm. You're like, you really want to do the thing and you really want to see that, and you're like, I'll make it fit. because I want
Indeed. Well, I think
we've
that's
all
the
done it
thing.
though.
You can't, when you are thinking about making it fit with a jet fighter bike, as you found out from your bike fitter, it's possible that maybe it just
Jet fighter might not work for me, right? Maybe I'm good with props,
right.
probably fast enough, right? So,
and that's actually interesting. Like, I think it's always, which would be really cool. And when they had the podiums for races, if like when people went to the podium, they had to take their bike and like their shoes and their wetsuit and be like, this stuff got me here. And like they had to stand with all their stuff. Cause you'd be like, that wetsuit is like 4 years old and they don't even have race wheels on that bike, and you didn't even run in the fancy supernatural shoes. Like, how'd you run so fast without those fancy supernatural shoes? Or maybe they had one of those things or whatever. But we presume that these high performing, by the finish time athletes are all taking advantage of all this stuff, and actually not all of them are. It's just sort of that visibility syndrome where something's new and you see one of them, and you want it, you see it everywhere. Like, everyone's got one of those jet fighter bikes. I want one. Jet fighter bikes are everywhere. Pew pew pew. And you're like, actually, jet fighter bikes are only 10% of this entire field. 90% is ordinary bikes, and you can't even see them. Like, it's like they don't exist. Your friend's over there with an ordinary bike, like, hey, how's it going? And you're like, I wonder where my friend is. Like, oh, jet fighter bike. And you just kind of go over there and you totally ignore your friend who's like, I thought we were meeting. God, can't see me with my ordinary bicycle. Yeah. So, anyway, if you want to be noticed, get a jet fighter bike. If you want to be fast, make a smart decision for sure. All right, and if you want to meet me in Mallorca, go to Mallorca first, and then I'll meet you. Jet fighter bikes. All right, maybe your jet fighter bike can take you from Madrid to Mallorca. Like, maybe there's an option. I don't know about these new bikes. All right, next topic. All right, what's on tap? Let's go. 20 minutes in. What do we got?
All right, gravel series or the hardest triathlon you've never heard of. How about those?
Let's do the gravel series. All right, so this popped up on my news feed because I'm sort of into gravel right now. It's sort of my big searching piece. And so when I was browsing the internets and my social feed to try and figure out, like, hey, what's going on? What can we talk about? I was lo and behold surprised to see that USAT just announced like a multi-sport gravel series, if you will. Officially, they said, we fully support gravel triathlon and the other gravel multi-sport disciplines. And we look forward to being a part of its continued growth. No fighter jets. All right. I put the last part in. Although a gravel fighter jet would be pretty amazing. All right. So what it looks like to me, just going through this, basically, the national championships are in Arkansas. Surprise! In June. So the second race of the series is the national championship. So I hope everybody's ready because the other 8 races happen after the national championship. So this is actually a really good opportunity where people who don't even know this is happening, somebody out there some enterprising person or multiple enterprising people are like, I don't even know what this thing is. But you know what? Nobody knows what this thing is. I'm going to go do this thing and I'm going to be a national champion, take a lot of pictures and be like, national champion, men's age group, like winner. And there's like literally like 3 other people who are there. Someone's going to show up to this thing with a jet fighter bike, by the way, 100% guaranteed. Someone's going to be like, what? I can't ride this thing over there. What? But I will say, as much as I like to make fun of USA Triathlon, I was definitely pleased to see that there is some version. I actually was talking with Jeremiah Bishop when we were riding, whatever that was, 2 years ago now or whatever, about some kind of multi-sport version for a gravel, because the gravel bikes take you to all these cool places. I was like, yeah, it's cool, but also the swimming holes, who knows what's in that swimming hole, because nobody comes out here. It could be full of bear poop, could be like a dumping ground for some sort of chemical. Like, how do you do that? But I do love the idea of being outdoors, and I do love the idea of competition. So I was kind of excited to see this play out. It's Olympic. It's like sprint and Olympic distance. There's nothing up to the half distance, I believe, that's there. But the places where they're having these races, just so you know, New Jersey, Arkansas, Illinois, Michigan, Colorado, Nebraska, California, Michigan, and Texas. So a pretty diverse slate of places. They kind of did a decent job of spreading it out around the country. I don't know. What do you think?
I'm really, I was originally like, this is just kind of a recycled version of Xterra. Mm-hmm. But I clicked on some of the races and one is I really like that they're all very. I clicked on all the races and I checked out the courses and stuff, and just to see like where are they riding, what kind of places, and they're all local, put on by, they're very local events, which is really kind of fun. Which if you go old school in triathlon, it's back when, there were very few major, corporations that put on triathlon, and it was a lot of independent events, right? So these are all independent events in these particular places put on by local, which is a great way to, support local racing, which is kind of fun. And local racing is just kind of fun by itself. So I thought that was kind of fun, is that they're all, independently owned races and stuff like that. Yeah. And the courses were not super technical. A lot of them are, it's fire road or, gravel road or something like that. There's a lot of, out and backs, or there's a box or something like that. So I think it's very, approachable. It doesn't like, oh, hey, you got to do this rock drop, or you got to do some technical maneuver. It's like, you can just go ride your bike on dirt, which is cool. And I guess the last one that I thought was great was that if you have the website up, you gotta check out the Dirty Mitten in Middleville, Michigan.
That's the one I was just clicking on it.
Awesome.
Did you see that belt?
Those guys crushed it. Because if you click the Dirty Mitten, because Michigan's shaped like a mitten. I want to go do this race. It's got an awesome website. You look at the more info, and they call themselves the Gravel Triathlon World Championship of the Universe. And they hand out a belt that looks like it's out of WWE wrestling, and you only get the belt if you go do their gravel race and then their triathlon. So it's a back-to-back event. Like who I'm going to get to ride my bike twice in a weekend. That's awesome. So and you go from this event to you can go click on the other one in Steamboat, and it's the website's super chill, go ride the hills, it'll be beautiful. I'm okay. Just the diversity of events is just super fun. And this one just really resonated with me, of the Gravel Triathlon World Championship of the Universe. They declared it themselves. Done. Yes. I love it. You got to go in September.
Done. Just be there, right? Just do the thing. I agree 100%. I saw it and I was like, oh, this is fantastic. This is it actually some personality back in multi-sport, right? Which I think is kind of been missing, and was a huge part of the sport in the 80s with some of the elites. Were having a monkey ton of fun while also racing. I think we've kind of lost that. There's not a lot of fun. Everybody's super serious on their jet fighter bikes. You notice people in jet fighters don't smile a lot. They might be smiling out of their helmets, but I think a lot of the smiling is just 4Gs, don't throw up inside my helmet. Like you going down a hill with your helmet on. But we missed some of that fun stuff. So I'm actually excited, because I feel like while I've been sort of net down on triathlon overall and multisport, whereas it just gets more expensive and just harder to get into, and more expensive to go places, and then expensive to be there. Who's got all this money to kind of join in the new sport, right? I think something like this could actually be a way to bring some of those people back to the sport, who are actually, I have a wetsuit and some sneakers, and it sounds kind of fun, because you've been on a gravel bike and you've been oh, that looks like a cool place to swim. Don't have my stuff with me on my bike. So I'm excited to see how this plays out, for sure.
I like I said, I like the independent nature of each one of the supporting the local races. And then, that makes, it looks like it makes the entry fees, more, reasonable, it's always a fun day, right?
Yes.
That's cool, and you get to, if you do well enough, you can typically, you're towards the front of the race, or there's just, you're racing with more, you feel like you're racing with more of your peers than the guy that flew in from Czechoslovakia, so
yeah, totally. Anyway. I agree. Okay. Let's just take, what would you do? Because we can't be on this episode forever at 30 minutes right now, but let's just talk, let's brainstorm right now. Okay. So you're going to do this gravel, multi-sport event. By the way, they have gravel paddle races for USAT. They're open to gravel rowing events as well, not just gravel running, which I think is funny, because we've been swim, bike, run for so long, and it's oh, I can't do that. Can't do bike, run, swim. Can't do no, we're swim, bike, run. And now it's oh, gravel. Fuck it. Yeah. Gravel blending cooking race. We love a gravel blending cooking race. Yeah, totally. Gravel, stop at a laptop, have a latte. I love that race. We're open to all of these races. USAT is like anything with people who are going to show up and pay money to do it, and it's multi-sport. Let's do it. Totally. Raising 3 kids, multi-sport family. Let's be a part of this thing. So, all right. So we got this race that's happening. Let's talk about the aid stations. How would you make the most awesome aid station for triathletes, like people who are multi-sporters who are in the woods? Like, what would you put on that thing, right? How would you do
Oh
this?
man. Like the mountain bike races I've done, there's always a
Right.
bacon station. Those are always fun.
Okay, bacon
Like there's
station.
always bacon station is always fun. Like there's some guy that's gonna hand you bacon or like put bacon in your mouth as you ride by. So that's always a little bit on the goofy side. So that's kind of fun, you know.
I was thinking maybe you could like rent a bear suit, and then when people came around, you could be like, "Roar!" Like, holy shit, you know, and you'd be like, "Do you want a gel?" And they'd be like, "Oh, like on the ground,
that would be
like,
good. Yeah, that'd be
you're a
good.
bear," you know? Yeah, no, maybe not.
I love it. Yeah, I think it's good. I think it's good. I did a mountain bike race where they had a squirrel was the college mascot of the.
Okay.
It was a white squirrel, so that like the squirrel was out there, but he wasn't as scary as it would be if a bear jumped out. But it was kind of fun to see the mascot, person dressed up as the mascot is the white squirrel out there is kind of fun.
I think you could have some fun with these folks too, because these people who are obviously on gravel now, like all bets are off with them. So you could say, like, you could have a place where you have like imagine like having a place on the race course where you don't like change the race course at all, but you just like have like maybe put a bike rack there and put a couple bikes on the bike rack, right? And then have a couple ropes like hanging from a tree with knots and be like, oh, this is the part where you climb to the top of the tree and come back down again. Then get it back on your bike. You can't go past this. You have to do this thing. How many people do you think would be like, shit, all right, here we go? Like,
yep.
I don't remember what was part of this
Let's
race. Got to do it. Right? Let's climb this rope, I bet I think you get a bunch of people to do some pretty crazy stuff. I know, because when you're in race mode, people's brains just default to like, they start making decisions that are optimized for their finishing time, So the question would be like, do I or do I not have to climb this rope? It would be like, how fast can I get through this obstacle so I can keep going? So I could argue with this person about it, but then I'm not climbing the rope. So by default, especially if you've got someone on a rope, or if we get the person in the bear costume to show up just 10 seconds after they dismount their bike, pretty much everyone's going to climb that rope. I think that'd be pretty awesome. I don't know. All right.
Yeah. It's like the blending of triathlon versus what those like adventure races that were on.
Yeah.
Well,
like
Discovery.
What about the guy from the Tour de France who dresses like the devil? Why don't you just have
the
person who dresses like the bear?
Yeah.
Just go to all the events dressed like the bear. Be like the bear guy. Or person, or however if I identify as a bear, like whatever you want to be. Just be a bear. Just do that thing. I don't know. I think, like, obviously in some places, theoretically you think the bear would be accepted in Steamboat, but that website looks pretty fancy. I don't know if they're really down with the bear, but those people and the mitten people, they would love to have a bear show
I like a WWE. I love it. I want the belt. I think
they
I might
totally would do it.
It might be my new focus event for next year. I'm going to put it on the list.
Exactly. I could see them being like, actually, you know what, everybody, we're so sorry. Like the timing chip mechanism didn't really break. So 3 of you were really close together and we just can't quite tell like the starting, the wave, whatever. So we've put the first place medal inside the center of this steel cage, and the 3 of you can just go in there, and whoever emerges from the cage with the medal is officially first place. All right, go for it. Right?
Yeah, I love how they upped it. Like you all these ultra and the ultra mountain biking and ultra running, everybody wants a belt buckle. How often do you get a WWE belt? I mean, come on, that's great. That's great. They took it one up. I like it. Next level.
Next level. I don't know where you'd put that thing. Now we need gravel trophy cases, right? Like the fill that, like, where am I going to put this belt that I won? Yeah. I can't knit that into a quilt that you would then use later out of all of your race shirts. Although maybe you could knit a belt into your quilt. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know. I'm the person. Do you even take race shirts anymore? I don't take race shirts. I'm like, I don't want them. Do you take them?
If they're a tech t-shirt, you know what? I still do because
Okay.
I'll rotate through them and stuff like that. But I'm not as excited as I used to be about them. So it's more about doing the thing, checking that
Mm.
one off my list. But sometimes it's nice to have the shirt for a little while. I did the thing, walk around and have the shirt. I did the thing.
Mm.
It's good.
Okay.
But yeah, what? So any of these other we want to talk about? Are we hitting our upper limit?
We're getting close up. Let's get 8 more minutes because I do have to get in my car and speed over to the place that I talked about that I can't talk about on a microphone and get a letter from the people who are doing the thing that so my alternate life, the non-triathlon life, non-multi-sport life. Okay, let's see what else we got here. One more bonus one for those of you who stuck in this long or skipped ahead. Let's talk about Gustav and Christian and their coach just a little bit. I don't want to dive too deeply down the rabbit hole, but if you aren't aware, their coach Alexander, I think his last name is, I don't even know what it is, Bu or whatever.
Olav Alexander.
Yeah,
Olav first name.
Okay, Olav. So he has a very interesting life story, and he's been sort of coaching these athletes, and his approach to coaching is very different than what has been traditionally put out there as coaching. So coaching itself has evolved, right? So there's a lot of science in terms of what he does, but just to briefly step back and sort of say, like, back in the day, you had, when Ironman first started getting big, you had like Paul Huddle, Rock Fry, Paula Newby Fraser. They started multisports.com, and they were coaching, and they were personalities first, and they had training plans, right? So sort of like, I'm hanging out with the awesome people who've done this thing, and they're super interesting and amazing, and there's also like a training plan. That was sort of the early stages, and then coaching started to become a little more serious. Other people wanted coaching, age groupers. That's how I got into the business of running an endurance station. And at that point in time, the elite level coaches, people didn't really talk about them. Like, there were tons of pros, but nobody really had nobody would say, I did this thanks to my coach who got me here. It was just sort of like, I'm the person. Like, nobody would really talk about their coach. Now we sort of moved back down the other end of the spectrum, where coaches are becoming personalities again. Not because like they're running a campaign that like was evil or illegal or whatever, but that I think it's becoming more acceptable that people are willing to sort of share out that they use like external input, advice about what it means to be better. So it is refreshing to see that these elite athletes are willing to say, here's our coach. He's awesome. He helps us and we work together. And that the coach himself is actually willing to say, hey, here's how I actually work with these athletes. He's pretty open and transparent about it. There's a couple of things he doesn't talk about. For the most part, he talks about some of those basic items. So that, to me, the backdrop is like, oh, wait a minute, like, there's a coach. Oh, they actually said who the coach is. Oh, I can actually find the coach on the internet. Hey, oh my God, the coach is actually talking. Like, this is incredible, because those steps never align at all. And it's really hard to kind of put two together. So it's been really interesting. I don't know about you, but I mean, I've seen he's been on a couple podcasts. I've read a few articles and everything. Like, how did you plug into the sort of him being out there and sort of sharing some of that knowledge?
Yeah, so I think I heard of it, tangentially through all the success of the Norwegian athletes, and then I think you cued me to go listen to the podcast again with Jack Kelly. Does a 2-part thing with him, and then I just Googled him and watched a couple other videos, and like you said, he's you are struck by how the balance between it's an athlete coach partnership, and then, while the athletes are certainly, famous and winning things, they are definitely, very complimentary to their coach. And the same thing for the coaches, also becomes kind of like, now, not necessarily a personality, but also just recognized in the team, right, of the athlete and the development of the athlete. And in his particular, what I found interesting about his particular approach was that it's really highly technical, and like, there's a lot of numbers, and they do a lot of lactate testing. And so I was trying to figure out, like, how does that really apply, to age group coaching or my own age group, space and stuff like that, I can't lactate test myself. I mean, like, if you watch a video of him, he has a little box and he pulls it out of the back of the car while they're doing their tempo, and he ear pricks the guy, and they're like, you're at like 5 millimoles. You're running too hard. You're at 3 millimoles. That's right for you, you know? And I'm like, no, I do not have a kit that I'm going to pull out of the back of my truck and lactate test. So how can I get, you know, how can I scale that to me? And I think my biggest takeaway from that was like, it's just a really disciplined version of zones, of like, they really know what zones they want to be in. And then they're very disciplined about it. I mean, I think that's kind of why we see the rise of, you know, all this, you know, you're riding your bike too hard. Zone 2 is actually an easy ride, you know, of like just being really disciplined about being in the right zone for the right training effect. I think when he talks about it, he's basically saying like it's not, we're not doing anything new. We're just taking, you know, concepts even further, right? Of like staying in particular zones for particular reasons at particular parts of the season and stuff like that. So I think that was my biggest takeaway, is that like for my own training, is that how could I, you know, scale it, would be making sure that I'm very conscious of being about in the right zone and what I'm trying to get done for that particular workout. Right. If like if it's an easy day, it has, regardless of what my numbers say, it needs to be actually easy. Right. Or whatever.
Right.
So
yes. And that's part of what, you know, having a coach like that kind of running the show, like just says what to do. And from what it appears like on the outside, he does a fair amount of that. Like they sketch out a plan, but he's in charge of the day-to-day stuff. And he manages, you know, not only just the workout and monitoring it, but also nutrition, you know, so some days you might eat more, some days you might eat less. Depends on the work you're doing, where you're doing it, what the goals are, how many consecutive days, et cetera, et cetera. And he sort of manages all of those logistics and then keeps the athletes on track, which is huge. Because if you think about getting better from an athlete perspective, it's learning lessons, but there's lessons we're learning that we're not even aware of. Much like our friend who doesn't have a fighter bike, there's things happening right now to my body that I should be aware of because they're waving at me, but I'm not paying attention to them because I'm really fixated on some other items that have taken my attention. And I think having a coach, especially one to this degree and level of professionalism, is allowing these athletes to sort of be like, ooh, I can twist these dials. I didn't even know these dials existed. There was a dashboard that I could change things on that are going to turn into better performance for me. Because they can optimize for it. Like we only have so many things that we can put inside of our bucket of how do I manipulate my training, because we also have like a life bucket and a work bucket and you know, whatever else we're doing. We just can't control for all the things we want to do. And there's a fair amount of that. So people will throw out a lot of the information simply because they're like, yeah, last year they said on the podcast, they spent 6 months at altitude. Like they just lived at altitude for 6 months and trained, right? They talked about their day. And when you think about their day, it's kind of wacky, but it was really insightful for me. So my takeaways, I'll tell you, was about the day side. So they get up, they eat a little something, and they go work out, right? And they come back, and either they'll transition to like a brick run or something like that. That's like an easy day. But a more normal day is they'll get up and swim, come back, they'll have a breakfast, and they'll get on the bike and ride. And sometimes they'll ride and run, or they'll just ride and then have like a lunch and then run later. But they pretty much do 3 sports a day on a given day. And they'll typically swim like Ironman distance. They'll bike a couple hours, 3 to 5 hours, depending, and they'll run 10K to 20K depending. So some days are really, really big. Some days are really small. They change all sorts of numbers, but don't worry about all that piece. The big takeaways for me were, number one, sleep. They sleep a ton.
Sleep is huge.
They sleep a ton. They sleep a lot at night. They're in bed early, like 9. They're not up until like 6. They're sleeping more than my teenagers sleep before they work out. And they also sleep during the day as well. So if they come back and have lunch, they'll often sleep for not like a 15-minute nap. I mean, like 60 to 90 minutes during the middle of the day and go again. And the way I framed this up, I think we were talking, I can't remember. It's like they're getting 2 days. But they're getting 2 days for every one of our days because they're getting all this rest between their sessions to go out and do it again. Whereas like if I work out in the morning and then dash to work and then do a bunch of work, and then I've got like 45 minutes at lunch to do a 30-minute run, which involves running and stress and showering and getting back and being late for a meeting. Like, did I run today in addition to ride? I did. Was I able to absorb that? I'm not sure, because like it was so complex. So for them to be able to factor in that rest, which is something I've taken to heart. I sleep 15 minutes like every day. I have a nap that I just go and take it. I'm going to be napping after this episode for sure. And that's number one. And number two was sort of being like, well, they also, in order to make that schedule work, they got rid of everything else. So when they were like, he's like, okay, do I want to sleep or get a massage? He's like, I want to sleep. Do I want to sleep and do like a bunch of crunches? He's like, I want to sleep. He's like, do I want to sleep and like get a like a, what do you call those things? Like a Theragun. We could Theragun ourselves.
Yeah.
Like, forget the Theragun. We just sleep. He's like, we could do mindfulness and yoga. He's like, you could sleep. He's like, I'll just sleep. Like, they're basically saying like all the other things. So we have our sport. We have swim, bike, and run. And then outside of that, there's all sorts of other things you can do that are sort of like second or third order activities that may fit better into your day because of who you are as a human being. Like life, I can't work out again, but I can, I don't know, like stretch for 10 minutes a night. So I'll stretch. That'll make me a better athlete. And to his point, he's like, you're better off just finding a way to either just go to bed 10 minutes earlier, for example, or find another way to fit in a session that's actually a session, right? His point is basically, if you're swimming, biking, and running to be a better triathlete, then you're going to get better. If you add all this other stuff to it just to make you better, not in the sense of like, I need to do this to heal because I've gotten injured or whatever, but then he's like, it's not as effective. It's kind of a waste of time. And that was sort of like a good reminder, because I think people, we were talking about this earlier, like I think people default to complexity when they're doing something. They're like, how do I lose weight? So one option is just like eat cleaner foods. Like just eat clean. Like you can eat what you want, but just eat clean foods. Like don't eat pretzels covered in peanut butter with chocolate drizzle on top. Like let's have an apple. Like just start with that, right? That's a very easy way to do for it. But what a lot of people do is they're like, I'm going to become, paleo vegan. I'm going to be palegan, and I'm going to throw out everything in my pantry to the surprise of my family. I'm also going to buy these supplements from a company that is crazy expensive that require me to make them the night before and then put them in a special temperature insulated fridge, which I need to buy from Sweden, that goes here. And then I'm going to put these in, and no one else ought to touch it. Like keep my kids away from all this stuff or whatever it is. They can have their own food. I feel bad now that I throw out all your food. You can have your food, but I put your food outside by the garbage cans in case I want to throw it out again. I can just tilt it into the trash can, and it's far away from me because I don't like to take the trash out anyway. So if it's located near the trash cans, I won't even probably go near your food, but you unfortunately have to cook and eat by the trash can, because that's my opinion of you, because you're not eating these specially highly engineered supplements that I bought in Sweden, which I'm keeping at a special temperature. And that's your plan, and how long does it last? Well, probably until you're kicked out of your house or run out of money. But we make it so complex because we're like, that's just got to be the best way. And no, actually the best way is the easiest way, like the least friction in some cases, or the maximum result. In this case, sleeping more is the biggest predictor of like not only better life outcomes, but just better physical performance outcomes as well. So you need to sleep more. Like you're just not, if you want to be better, sleep more, start there. Once you're sleeping 8-9 hours a night and you're still not getting better, then come back and we'll figure out what's next. But make that sleep happen, instead of doing all the other stuff. Like we do all the other stuff because we don't want to have to do the really hard work, which is like, how do I turn off my Netflix? Like, what will I talk about if I don't watch TV after 8 p.m.? Like I love that stuff. Like, that's my time. Like, what am I going to do? Like, people don't want to change that part of their life, and I think the coach's point was, if you want these incredible results and you want to do these incredible things, whatever that level is for you, I'm here and I want to be here, or whatever it is, then you have to figure out what those choices are. And I think his perspective is great because, he said the athletes go to him. Christian comes, what about this? Gustav says, what about this? And he's like, yes, no. And he's like, okay, we'll try it. We'll see. I'll measure you at the end of the workout. Like you say, I'm going to eat this, or you say, I'm going to go do that. He's like, okay, go do it. They do it. He comes back. He's like, click, gets them on the ear. And he's like, nope, we tried, whereas I think for age group athletes, especially without a coach, it's one of the benefits of having a team, because we have people we can talk to. But when you're on your own, you'll often be like, well, I've got this planned workout for week 7 that builds off the prior 6 weeks. So it seemed, it's just kind of like all the other stuff. Or I just found this on the internet. It's incredible. There's a race with a bear in it. I have to climb a rope. So I'm going to do this other workout. I've never done it before, but it seems amazing. I'm super excited. I'm just going to go do that. At the end of the year, they come back and they're like, I don't understand why I didn't get better. Like, look at you had a fantastically interesting year. You didn't do the things that made you better. And that's I think that's where the value of a coach comes in. And so I'm super pleased that he's talking about some of these things, because to me at least, and maybe because I'm old school, it's like a breath of fresh air. Like it's not, doesn't have to, getting better doesn't have to be that complicated or really that expensive. It takes, dedication. It takes focus. And it means saying no to a bunch of stuff while also saying yes to the right stuff. So working out that mechanism of, no, I'm not going to go do that because that takes me away from this stuff, I don't know. So sorry, got carried away there.
I think DudeGuy. Yep. DudeGuy.
So what were you going to say? Wrap it up for us.
Oh, wrap it up. I thought it was a pretty good, a pretty good summary of his. The last thing I was going to say is that, kind of to your point was that they also fuel very differently. Like the one, I think Kristen is a little bit of a heavier athlete than than Gustav Iden. Anyway, one of them is a little bit heavier than the other one, and he just performs better heavier. Like that dude needs to eat because he's doing a lot of work, and like they definitely, and like you said, you make good choices relative to the foods that you're trying to eat, relative to them being whole foods or less processed. But they definitely track that, of the fact that like hey, he's got to produce a lot of energy, and like this is what the energy cost of running for that duration is. So we need to fuel it. And so, it comes down to being in the right, being in the right zone, sleeping enough, and then getting enough to eat to fuel that work, and then having the focus to stay on task with that stuff. And certainly that's where the coaching has helped, and then I think that's where I think, some of our community has helped too, of like, because you can kind of compare notes to some other folks of like, hey, this is what I want to do. And then this is where I want to go. And you can get some folks of like, yep, tried that, or, yep, you can give that a try, or, you can get some advice from some folks by trying that have tried it already, or have tried it and it's been successful, and they can tell you what to watch out for. So,
right. Yeah, absolutely. Like that's just I think a huge part of people get focused on the doing, right? Like we have Strava, and Strava tells us who worked out when, and Coach Patrick is riding, and like tells you where I went, but didn't tell you there's no metric on like what I learned, like or what I took out of this activity and what made me better. And not to say that every workout has to have a point, but if you're not taking things in, if you're not sort of absorbing stuff while you're doing it, then I think you're sort of missing out on all this potential opportunity to get better. I mean, one of the reasons why people say like, do I need a heart rate monitor? I'm like, sure. Like power meter, I'm like, okay. Like, do I need to log in this website? I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Not because you need to know all those things now, but because at some point in time, you're going to want to go back and be like, well, now I really care about heart rate, or now I really care about this cadence thing, or now I'm really curious, like, where do I run, right? Or how did I hurt my Achilles? Well, we can go back and look at all of these things and then use that information. So even if you're not mentally engaged or don't have the ability to always be learning, like you do a great job with your notes, but not everyone does that with their workouts. The data can also help craft a story in retrospect as well. And similarly, that's part of what our words do for the team, right? You come back from a session, like you see people like Jeff Phillips coming back and be like, hey, 2x1 miles, I was doing great, but the last 0.3 of the mile and the second repeat just really kind of got to me, and I had to do X, right? So he's processing out loud what happened to him in the workout, and the team is coming back with feedback and sort of asking some questions, which is part of how we all learn. Him sort of sharing out what he's doing helps all of us learn, because we're picking up some stuff. And I think that aspect, like literally like activating the parts of your brain that make you think about the stuff that you're doing and why you're doing it, whether it's just about you and your stuff, or me and your stuff, or you and me and someone else's stuff, that makes us better athletes. Like we're tapping into this other element of our training. And I think that's part of what having a coach like Alexander, Olav does, because he's the best part about Norwegians is you can just say their name in any order and it's still the same person. I don't know if you knew, if you knew that. Internet, don't come after me. My name is McCrary Patrick. Yes. But that's really valuable. Like, I think people forget about the feedback. They're like, no, just tell me what to do. It's like, if I just tell you what to do, you're not actually learning. We've got to get that middle piece there. And it's the messy middle part of the stuff that people don't necessarily want to opt into. But once you start figuring out the operating system of what makes you a better athlete, or why this works over that, now you can actually use the stuff that you have. and make better decisions and, get better outcomes. So if you haven't already caught up on some of the podcasts, I'll make sure I'll drop some links in the show notes to some articles for this, because it's just a great masterclass in how people simplify and do the work. At the end of the day, getting better at endurance sport is doing some flavor of work. And they've really sort of brought it down to that essence, and it's exciting to watch. Yeah. So awesome.
DudeGuy.
DudeGuy.
Did it.
Awesome. We survived. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. This is our longest DudeGuy yet. Pretty ambitious for DudeGuy number 3. Next time, we'll have even more exciting topics. I will not be dressed in a bear suit next time, despite obviously many pleas that will soon be coming online. 2 weeks from now will be, actually 2 weeks from today will be St. Patrick's Day. Maybe we have to do some St. Patrick's themed background or something like that to figure that one out. Awesome. All right, here, let me finish this episode. I'm gonna hit this end recording button.